Everyone is talking about the No Buy 2026 challenge. You have probably seen it all over social media. Cut your spending, save money, build discipline, stop buying things you do not need. And it sounds great, right? But here is what I have noticed. Nobody is actually showing you the math behind it. Nobody is breaking down the numbers. Nobody is explaining what happens when you take those savings and actually put them to work. Because this is not just about cutting spending. This is not just about willpower or self-control. When you understand the mathematics behind compound interest, you realize that the no-buy challenge is not about sacrifice at all. It is about wealth building. It is about exponential growth. And by the end of this video, you will see exactly how much money you are leaving on the table every single time you make an unnecessary purchase. So let's break down the math. Let's look at the actual numbers, and let's see what the No Buy 2026 challenge can really do for your future. Let's start with a simple scenario. Let's say you decide to cut $100 per month in unnecessary spending. Now, what does that actually look like in real life? Well, maybe it is 3 or 4 coffee runs per week at $5 each. Maybe it is one subscription service you barely use. Maybe it is those impulse purchases on Amazon when you are bored scrolling late at night. We have all been there. $100 per month does not sound like much, right? But let's do the math. $100 per month times 12 months equals $1,200 per year. $1,200. That is already a decent start to an emergency fund. That is a nice vacation. That is breathing room in your budget. But here is where most people stop thinking about it. They see $1,200 and they think, okay, that is nice. But it is not life-changing. It is not going to make me rich. And they are absolutely right. Saving alone will not make you wealthy. Saving alone is just the first step. The real magic, the real transformation happens when you take that money and you invest it. So let's assume you take that $100 every single month, and instead of just letting it sit in a savings account earning basically nothing, you invest it in a low-cost index fund. Historically, the stock market has returned about 10% annually over the long term. Some years are higher, some years are lower, but on average, 10% is a reasonable baseline. Now, this is where compound interest enters the picture. And compound interest is the most powerful force in all of personal finance. Compound interest is when your money earns money, and then that money earns money, and then the money that the money earned also earns money. It sounds confusing, but it is actually beautifully simple. It is exponential growth, not linear growth. Here is the formula. A equals P times the quantity 1 plus R divided by N, all raised to the power of N times T. Let me break that down piece by piece. A is the final amount you will have at the end. That is what we are trying to calculate. P is your principal. In our case, we are investing $100 per month. But for the formula, we need to think about this as a series of monthly contributions. R is the annual interest rate. In our example, that is 10% or 0.1 in decimal form. N is the number of times the interest compounds per year. For monthly compounding, that is 12. And T is the number of years you are investing. Now, do not worry if math is not your thing. You do not need to memorize this formula. What you need to understand is the concept. Small amounts of money, invested consistently over time, grow into massive amounts because of compound interest. So let's plug in some actual numbers and see what happens. Let's start with 10 years. You invest $100 per month, every single month, for 10 years straight. At 10% annual return, how much do you have at the end? The answer is $20,484. Now pause for a second and think about that. You only put in $12,000 of your own money. $100 times 12 months times 10 years equals $12,000. But you ended up with $20,484. So where did the extra $8,484 come from? That is compound interest. That is your money working for you. That is the market generating returns, and those returns generating more returns. You made $8,000 without doing anything except staying consistent and letting time do its thing. Now let's take this further. What if instead of 10 years, you do this for 20 years? Same $100 per month, same 10% annual return. You just keep going. The result after 20 years is $75,603. Let's break that down. You contributed $24,000 total over 20 years. But compound interest gave you an extra $51,603. More than double what you put in came from compound interest alone. And here is where it gets truly mind-blowing. What if you keep going for 30 years? After 30 years of investing $100 per month at 10%, you have $226,049. Read that again. $226,000 from $100 per month. You only contributed $36,000 of your own money over those 30 years. But compound interest added $190,049 on top of that. That is the power of exponential growth. That is the math that nobody talks about when they tell you to do the no-buy challenge. Now here is the part that really blows people's minds. Compound interest is not a straight line. It does not grow steadily. It accelerates over time. Let me show you what I mean. In year 1 of investing $100 per month, your account grows to about $1,260. It is barely more than what you put in. In year 5, you have about $7,700. Still growing, but nothing crazy. In year 10, you have that $20,484 we calculated earlier. Okay, now we are getting somewhere, but look what happens next. In year 15, you have $41,792. Whoa, that is almost double what you had at year 10, even though you only added 5 more years. In year 20, you jump to $75,603. The curve is getting steeper. In year 25, you are at $133,789. The acceleration is insane. And in year 30, you hit $226,049. Do you see what is happening here? The biggest gains happen at the end, not at the beginning. This is what mathematicians call a power law. This is exponential growth in action. And here is the tragedy. Most people quit way before they get to see the exponential phase. They invest for 1 year. They see $1,200, and they think, this is pointless. This is barely more than I put in. Why am I even doing this? So they stop. They cash out. They give up. They never make it to year 10. They never make it to year 20. They never see the curve go vertical. They miss the entire payoff. And that is heartbreaking because the math works. It always works. It just requires one thing: patience. You have to stay in the game long enough to see the exponential phase kick in. Now, let's talk about what happens if you scale this up. What if instead of cutting $100 per month, you cut $200 per month? Maybe you really commit to the no-buy challenge. You cancel a couple of subscriptions. You meal prep instead of eating out. You stop those random target runs. $200 per month at 10% for 30 years equals $452,098, almost $500,000, from $200 per month. Or what if you go even further? What if you cut $300 per month? Maybe you downsize your car payment. Maybe you negotiate your bills. Maybe you get serious about cutting the fat from your budget. $300 per month at 10% for 30 years equals $678,146. You are approaching $700,000. Let that sink in. $700,000 from cutting $300 per month. That is not deprivation. That is not suffering. That is wealth building. That is financial freedom. And here is what is crazy. Most people spend $300 per month on things they do not even remember buying. Subscriptions they forgot about. Impulse purchases, convenience spending. If you can redirect that money into investments, you are not giving anything up. You are trading temporary pleasure for long-term security. You are choosing future you over present you, and future you will thank you. So let's talk about mindset for a minute. Because I think most people misunderstand what the no-buy challenge is really about. Most people think it is about deprivation, about saying no to everything, about living like a monk and never enjoying anything. But that is the wrong way to think about it. The real mindset shift is this. Every dollar you choose not to spend is a dollar that has the potential to grow. That $5 latte? That is not just $5. If you invest it at 10% for 30 years, it becomes $38. You are choosing between $5 of caffeine now or $38 of wealth later. That $20 impulse buy on Amazon? If you invest it instead, that is $152 in 30 years. That $100 weekend shopping spree? That could be $761 in your retirement account 30 years from now. Suddenly, your spending decisions look very different when you understand the opportunity cost. You are not just spending money. You are spending future money. You are spending the compound interest that money could have earned. And once you see it that way, the choice becomes obvious. I am not saying never enjoy anything. I am not saying live like a miser. I am saying be intentional. Ask yourself, is this purchase worth what it could become if I invested it instead? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes experiences and memories are worth it. But a lot of the time, the answer is no. A lot of the time we are spending money on things we forget about within a week. And that is where the no-buy challenge becomes powerful. It forces you to confront those habits. So here is my challenge to you. Pick one habit, just one. Do not try to overhaul your entire life overnight. Start small. Maybe it is the daily coffee run. Maybe it is the subscription box you never use. Maybe it is eating out for lunch every single day. Maybe it is those late-night Amazon purchases. Pick one habit. Cut it. Take the money you would have spent and invest it instead. Open a brokerage account. Set up automatic transfers. Invest in a low-cost index fund. And then, forget about it. Let time and compound interest do the heavy lifting. Because here is the truth. The No Buy 2026 challenge is not about willpower. It is about math. And the math does not care about your feelings. The math does not care if it is hard. The math just works. If you cut $100 per month and invest it for 30 years, you will have over $200,000. That is not a maybe. That is not a hope. That is mathematical certainty. So if you found this video helpful, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the one habit you are cutting this year? What is your no-buy challenge goal? I read every single comment, and I would genuinely love to hear from you. And if you want more videos like this, breaking down the math behind money, the paradoxes of personal finance, and the strategies that actually work, hit that subscribe button. Because that is what this channel is all about. Understanding the numbers, seeing through the noise, and building real wealth. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.